Hello, this is Dr. Namie at the Workplace Bullying Institute. I'm its director. Welcome to the world of a former bullied individual named Clara. Now, Clara will tell you about her lived experience in her own words. When I sense a teachable moment for listeners, I jump in. But the true value of this Targets as Teachers project at WBI is for website visitors who are unsure about what's happening to them to get clarification and validation from someone who has walked in your shoes and for whom the bullying has stopped. And now, Clara.
Thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts about teachers as targets of health-harming mistreatment in their schools. I think most teachers know that they are fighting a war for our children. I will touch on a few issues I personally have experienced and then suggest a few steps that might help improve the safety and care of our students and teachers in public school. On April the 28th of 2011, I was left disabled by a student-on-teacher assault instigated by my final public school administration.
Wait a minute, let's stop right there. Was this physical assault, Clara?
Yes, I was.
Oh
yes,
my God.
Physically assaulted.
All right, go on, talk about it.
In 2010, a dozen stellar teachers and I were nominated for Teacher of the Year in a 5A school district in a neighboring community. It was a tremendous honor, and when neighbors saw it in the paper and on the news, they pressed me all the harder to bring my middle school theater arts program to our hometown school district. There was an opening in the middle school a mile from my home. I applied and was hired. It took me a long time to finish my formal teaching credentials, though I took my first job in education at the age of 10, when I volunteered a month of my summer vacation to help a favorite teacher with Head Start. I love education, and I have filled positions in the education community my entire life. In 1984, I became a child advocate and began speaking and writing as an ambassador for the sanctity of human life, and I've spoken across the country. And in 2000, I began advocating with Christian organizations, and then a strong Christian neuroscientist friend and I submitted testimony to the Texas House of Representatives subcommittee, where 3 of our 4 recommendations were published by the committee.
Oh, could you just stop right there? And
sure.
This tie-in with neuroscience, which has been really the source of the biggest advances in workplace bullying because of the research on the stressed brain and the impact on people's lives. What back then were you talking about in terms of neuroscience, could I ask?
We talk about how children's brains develop, and important information that the medical, scientific, and social communities need to know when we're dealing with children from conception to natural death. I kind of lump everybody into the child category, and all of us grow and develop in very specific ways, and it's important that we become aware of what those differences are so that we understand children better and can therefore take better care of them.
Thank you for that. I think
Sure.
People don't understand when there's an underlying biological substrate to what can account for their behavior,
Right.
that we foolishly make judgments about that which we see, and we think that it's a matter of personal will sometimes, but it can be biologically driven, which sounds so fundamental to me, but this is earth-shaking to employers who are basically hell-bent on condemning workers, as opposed to understanding that the very harm that they inflict on the worker is causing the very behaviors they're seeing. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But you got me detoured with the neuroscience. I'm sorry. Going back to your tale. I think that's fascinating. You have that early experience in that. That grounds you better than most targets, by the way.
When I met this neuroscientist in 1997, she diagnosed, I had an undiagnosed brain injury at the time, but I didn't know I had a brain injury. And after she knew me for 15 minutes, we were sitting across a conference table together. We were in an event together. And she said, "So tell me about your brain injury." And I said, "I don't have a brain injury." She was, lady, you don't know you have a brain injury? I said, I do not have a brain injury. And so we started from that kind of bizarre introduction to each other to becoming best friends.
Fascinating.
But
Fascinating.
she is an amazing lady.
Oh.
So my friend and I also submitted testimony through 2 separate amicus briefs to put before the United States and the Supreme Court. During the first month of my new school contract, I was saddened when the year began with large numbers of my students organized and intentional in their misbehavior. Anytime you see children organized in anything, you know that there are adults involved.
Ah.
The husband of the teacher I replaced still worked in my new school. He told me his wife suffered terrible mistreatment for 5 years before she resigned and left the classroom permanently. In public school, there is a professional development and assessment system, or PDAS. Future administrators look at these assessments and comments when considering hiring new teachers. In my 16 years of teaching public school, I had never scored below expectation, let alone unsatisfactorily. Generally, PDAS walkthroughs are a couple of times in the fall, a couple of times in the spring, and 1 45-minute observation a year. Administrators began walking through my classroom within the first few weeks of school. I often found them stalking outside the classroom. A number of times they called me out in public areas where students gathered and even in front of my classes. I was called to the office repeatedly with poor evaluation after poor evaluation. Early in the process, I asked them to comment on what I did well, or at least considered proficient.
Clara, let's stop there. Who
Sure.
are the they? Are we talking about the building administrators, principals, or superintendent?
Principals and assistant. Well, actually, it was principals, assistant principals, and other fine arts, the director of the fine arts.
Oh my God. That came from district then? Came from district
yes.
off? Okay.
Yeah, this was a district problem.
Okay, good to know. Go ahead.
Okay. It is my understanding that strong communications balances its comments. This was not the tactic of the school district. By Christmas, I had lost count of the assessments against me, and I had 4 unsatisfactory marks on my permanent record.
One semester?
Oh yeah.
Before Christmas?
By Christmas. The entire thing was dreadful for my students. My 20 by 20 portable classroom was 75 yards from the main building. Some classes had as many as 32 students, and a large number of my students were identified by special education and for behavior management concerns. Consistently, when students returned from off-campus suspension from the alternative school, they were enrolled in my classes. There were no other adults nearby, and the students clearly understood and understandably exploited that misbehavior would not result in consequences.
For them.
I had yes. 172 students in my combined classes. The only option for safety for them was to radically alter away from desk activities. This is a theater arts class. For me, the worst part of this administration was clearly weaponizing these children. I contacted my former district and they said they would love for me to come back the following year. I submitted my resignation the day after Christmas break and put my head down to keep my kids safe while teaching them as much theater arts as possible.
Now, Clara, did you agree then to finish the school year though? You resigned but finish the school year?
In teaching, if you want a principal to hire you again, you finish your contract.
Okay, all right.
So my students and I made it till April the 28th. The assault resulted in the tearing of the hard ring of cartilage that holds the hip joint together, called the labrum. A tear in the labrum generally happens among hockey players and during other aggressive, dangerous athletics or very serious accidents. I also suffered blunt force trauma to my bilateral mastectomy field. I've had 2 major surgeries to repair the hip and to remove most of the tissue from the right side of my chest and replace it with muscle from my back.
Oh my goodness.
I am no longer able to work, meaning I was forced to liquidate all assets and property and relocate from a 4-bedroom on half an acre in town to a 1980s vintage retired FEMA trailer 3 hours north of the community in which I grew up. In 2014, I confronted the school board about the treatment of students who learned violence against teachers and covering up problems in the district were acceptable. I have since realized that the district appears to be culling and sorting students into the haves and the have-nots. The haves are the ones that make the district look good. This is a small community, so certainly young students, parents, and other citizens know what is going on there. I am so saddened that this situation is going on in my hometown. In 2017,
and to follow it up, then, if they are deemed the have-nots, these are the ones who were thrown into your class. These are the ones who are deemed special needs or something. And then, to what end? What was the goal? What would be in it for the district to have this cruel sorting mechanism? What do you think?
I think that this community, and I grew up in this community. I was on the committee that wrote the grants to refurbish our courthouse, and I was the chair for refurbishing a theater in the town. And I was very active. You know, I was 53 years old. And so I had been visibly active in this community my entire life. And there was a tendency in the leadership that this town was an affluent historical town, and are you familiar with the movie The Stepford Wives?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we were in the Stepford community.
Oh.
And that over the years, it got to, if you're a have, then you step in line with that. It's a invisible, odorless,
unspoken,
drug. Yeah,
but agreed upon manner.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so in 2017, a CBS reporter was doing a program on violence in schools and came to my home with a camera person and interviewed me for over an hour.
How did they find you?
I post things on the online.
Oh, okay.
About, I have a picture that's blurred out. You can't really see the large scar down my back and the patch that was on my chest when I had to have this major surgery to repair the damage that was done to my chest. And on the poster, it says, if you think health harming mistreatment or bullying is simply psychological, think again.
Now, Clara, this is really important for targets. Now, my beef is with social media, primarily Facebook, because of all the bad that can be done to people and everything else. But yours is a perfect illustration of the positive use of such storytelling so as to gather and sometimes attract media attention. Targets always want media attention to their tail, convinced of its uniqueness. But the point is, the media are asleep. In this case, I'm glad they saw that you clubbed them over the head with dramatic picture, and that is undeniable. Wonderful.
However, the interview never saw the light of day.
Well, they filmed us for an entire Dateline show. Took a year to film it. Followed us around the country, and it didn't eat either. So that's how TV is.
Now, being in communications, my husband worked for the largest Christian radio corporate in the country, Salem Communications. And so both of us are fairly, and as an advocate who's spoken quite a bit.
Yeah, you're pretty savvy about, yes. You're not the average target, but they could learn from you. They could learn from you what you've known. Go ahead.
Well, I hope they can.
I might ask you to record a separate tutorial on how to disseminate stories, but go ahead.
Well, I would love to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute.
All right.
Okay. In this last January, I was able to reconnect with a student involved in the assault. She said she was treated as if she was a monster by the administration and teachers and kids. Long before the assault, her mother had been trying to get the administration to address the bullying she was suffering, but to no avail. When I told her I stood up for her to the school board, she cried. And she said she could not wait to tell her mother, as they have suffered far more than I have in these last 9 years.
I doubt that, but go ahead.
I think most public school teachers are at war for our children. I think teachers need scenario training, assertiveness training, peer-to-peer telephone and person-to-person support, and have to learn how to stand against corruption in administrations. And if I had more time, stand, actually it's intentional, S-T-A-N-D, say something, tell someone, take someone with you, 2 or 3 people to go with you, ask for help from a professional, know how to negotiate, and document everything, because if it isn't written down or recorded, it didn't happen.
That would be S-T-A-N-K-D, but that's all right. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're using the,
Okay.
The sound phonetic. Anyway, go ahead.
I
agree with you, but I might say that despite the high level of teacher abuse, and teachers and nurses are the 2 most maligned groups, without a doubt, because of, and I might say, because of your pro-social nature. Listen to you. You're an advocate for your kids. Teachers hang in there forever trying to see potential in children. They don't give up on kids nearly as quickly as the public does.
Yeah.
And so they also stay in harm's way for an extremely long amount of time, thinking that they too can extricate themselves. But did this, I'm curious, this former student, now an adult, did she share with you how the administration co-opted any of the kids to become, you said weaponized, to become violent toward teachers?
Yes, she did. And so when this happened,
I bet you were. That's why the administration couldn't stand you, by the way. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. But this is working in the Sanctity of Human Life Committee. I am deeply impressed that there are many people who just don't know how to think about these things in helpful ways. And I think in some ways, the kind of targeting that school administration faces, I think it creates monsters. I think it creates, the administrators get burned out and they become indoctrinated just like everybody else. But the kind of pressures they face are big. There are big dogs after them. And so after a while, it just breaks you down. And I think that that's what's happened. When I started out, when I was in college, I wrote papers about how I thought corporate educations and large public school education systems were not only going to slow children from learning, I thought it was going to stop children from learning. Because we are not corporate beings. We are interrelationship, family, community beings.
That's right.
And so that's kind of a whole different rabbit trail.
But it humanizes education, whereas we have definitely corporatized education.
Yeah.
You're right.
That's when I began my work as a child advocate. I think we need to choose our words very carefully and intentionally as we move against tyranny in our public schools. While I am only able to work lying flat on my back with a computer on a padded desk resting on my chest, I am able to visit people online, on video, on the phone, and for very short periods, person to person, like you and I are doing. I'm keeping busy writing, making music, writing short educational inspiration and story videos, and I create graphics. I publish online and in a women's Bible study. And from time to time, I do get an opportunity to teach short programs at different places. I am diagnosed with complex PTSD, chronic pain, and a severely compromised immune system after a prolonged systemic difficulty with the workers' compensation industry, who shields school districts from accountability for their wrongdoing. I am also learning about the disability community and socialized medicine since my injury. They are both nightmarish to navigate, and only Christian faith and the support of my Christian friends and family keep me going. Of course, my dear husband has carried the lion's share of the water through this situation, since I am unable to help him with most of the housework. I am thankful we are now in a nice retirement apartment. It is tiny, but it is safe. And after 7 years in North Texas, my husband and I are building a life for ourselves up here. I will never stop advocating for children. I will never stop pressing those who will listen to truly consider the eternal consequences of causing children to fail. It is written, it would be better for someone to have a Volkswagen tied around their necks and thrown into the sea than to hurt the child. I pray adults who have fallen into harming children awaken to the real consequences sooner than later. God is who he says he is, and he does what he says he will do. And he is crystal clear that there is only one way to avoid a position in what I like to call the hot place downstairs. Nobody wants that. I want my students to know I will take up for them. I will try my best to keep them safe. I will shine the light of day under the bus, under the bed, inside the closets, and on the slimy undercarriage of corruption. God will not suffer evil against children, and it's worth remembering. To him, we are all children. And when he adopts us into his kingdom, he is very protective of us. God always does what he says he will do. The easy, the hard, the saving, and the damning. This should terrify all of us, that we should always want to speak the truth in love and learn how to stand, S-T-A-N-D, strong, where he plants our feet. The Lord is my comfort and courage, and I will do my best to fail him less and follow him more as long as I draw breath. Gary, I really do appreciate this opportunity to share my thoughts on teachers as targets of health harming mistreatment in schools, and offering a few suggestions of things that might help improve this situation and to help everyone be safer and more successful. Thank you again for hearing me.
A couple thoughts. It goes without saying that your faith has kept you sane. Yep. Correct?
Correct.
I don't know for how many people that becomes an important well, it's Christian faith specifically, not just faith. So I just wanted to say that. And that's not everyone's choice, but faith in something. Faith that there's more than your own personal story. Faith that these events fit into a larger picture, which then, of course, it just amplified your advocacy. And that advocacy has, for more than you and just a couple targets, for many targets, has been the transformation of their lives from complete devastation to hope. Hope, purpose, and commitment. Yeah?
I can't tell you the number of times. It's been 9 years. And so, when I first started publicly talking about what was going on, oh my soul, I was,
a wreck.
A wreck. Yeah, I did not. I did not stop having the what I call the mean school dreams. Oh goodness, probably since we got this apartment, because while I was thankful to have a roof over my head, I wasn't in the safest of places, and so that compounded, and I was away. I was away from our daughter. I was away from lifelong friends. And so that was a really hard thing. And it took a long, long time to get treatment for my injuries. And even now in the disability and in because, I taught school most of my professional. So my disability is very low. My Social Security is very low because I taught school. Because I didn't finish 20 years, I have a third of my teacher retirement. And so I went from a very, very comfortable income and home and life to way the poverty line. And so now I can't just go to any doctor. I have to go to doctors who serve the low income community. And I've talked to caregivers about how I think they are experiencing a real high degree of compassion burnout.
Fatigue.
They just, they are just compassion fatigue. And so after a while, you cannot help but get blurred in the eyes of the caregivers. And so situations that in my former life would have been minor now are, potentially deadly. This Saturday will be 2 weeks ago, I was in the emergency room because I couldn't get help for an infection that I had, and it was very, very near systemic. And so the lifestyle that I have today is, it in no way it resembles the life that I had the first 53 years of my life.
It's more precarious. And I think people need to be very sympathetic to that. And this is all because of this displacement, because of that toxic school district and the principals who were in on it, who had, for some reason, as you said, eloquently weaponized the kids, who did all this, and then all the physical trauma you suffered. Now, have you had luck? You said you're diagnosed with complex PTSD. It takes a pretty shrewd therapist to do that. Have you been lucky in the past finding someone who understands it? No, you're nodding your head. No, tell us about the difficulty there, because people, targets will run into this. They're going to find unfeeling, basically ignorant therapists. What has been your experience?
Well, I have an asset in my neuroscientist friend, and she has been very helpful. One of the things, again, about the public health, the low-income health, is that folks in the mental health field generally rotate through public health. They will do a year.
Maybe an internship, perhaps, during their pre-license, maybe. I see.
There is no building a care team. I am an advanced stage cancer survivor, and I do have the brain injury that I have to work with, and so I have a lot of help. And I was 50. I'm 63 now, and so in the old world, I had a health team of that I used to help me build my support system so that I could function. And that doesn't exist in this world. And so I think what I would, if I was on a phone call, or if I was visiting someone who's in the bear cave, I would just pour into that person, and then people who are in that need, kind of like when I went through cancer. I had a cancer buddy, and my cancer buddy told me what to expect during chemo, and told me what to expect after my mastectomy, and came and visited me, and encouraged me to do the things I needed to do in order to survive my cancer. And I think bullied teachers, bullied people in general, need that. When they realize that they're a target, they need somebody who's been through it to walk through that with them.
I agree. Because not only do they need it for all the reasons you're mentioning, but the nature of bullying is to isolate that person, to deliberately isolate them, convince them that they are unique and no one else has ever gone through this. And that, of course, has been our 23-year lesson is you're not alone.
Right.
Go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry. Took you right off.
No, that's okay.
Like a bully buddy, a target buddy.
A target buddy. But one of the things that, I have had access to very good resources. And there is a man named Ken Sandy who has written well, not just written, but he has created an entire training program so that you can learn how to be peacemakers. And to be a peacemaker, he is an attorney. And so he, when a person is in a conflict, he has a step-by-step way for the person for the person who's looking for help to actually figure out, what am I doing that's giving this person this opportunity? Because that's where you start. You can't see it, but I have this necklace I wear. Can you see that? There's all these little circles. Well, in order to deal with this, you have to start with that little circle first.
Inner one, the innermost.
That's you. Yeah, you have to do with you. And then you can move out. And so it is hard when you are already beat down. The first thing you want to do is to get safe and stay safe. And sometimes that safety can be, the Peacemaker organization actually has people who train to help people work out big conflicts in their lives. And that, while I did not use a peacemaker because I was studying the peacemaking materials in order to be a conciliator myself, dealing with conflict, and it starts with yourself. And one of the things that I learned, and I really kind of already knew this, but I hadn't put my feet down on it, is, we are we're a lot of parts. And we have, inside of us, we have this inner voice. And that in my opinion, in my case, my inner voice is about the equivalent of an 8-year-old child. She's bright, she's beautiful, she's talented, and she has got a smart mouth, and she throws temper tantrums, and she gets so upset that she crawls under the bed and won't come out. And that's kind of that part of me in the middle. And so I had to learn how to step out of me and look at the situation. And I had to, and that helps me because I'm a teacher. And so dealing with, and so I am a teacher to me. And so that when that child part of me, that younger version of myself is in trouble, then the part of me that has learned and spent my life trying to become, an actualized adult, takes over and says, look, there is a place and a time for grieving. There's a place and a time for blowing off steam. There's a place and a time for resting and getting back to center. And it's not in public. It's not to strangers. These are places where you don't do that. You do that with friends. You do that with people who have been through it and are already out of it. And so helping you isn't going to cause them to relive their own trauma.
Exactly.
And so when I'm dealing with that part of me, the first person I have to take care of is her. I have to take care of.
Now let's stop there for a second. Targets, listening in. Yep. It sounds selfish, doesn't it? But for gosh sakes, for once in your life, will you listen to what Clara's saying? If you do not put yourself first, you will not survive this. You must. It's not a selfish act. No. Describe how it's not selfish, Clara. What's the difference between selfishness and what you're saying there?
Yeah. I have a game I play with my students, and I have these foam like Nerf balls. And every group I have ever led in my life has to play this game. And in the game, you know, you have the ball, you have your message, whatever it is, you're my mouse. And so, oops, oh, I blew it. What did I do?
Nothing.
But anyway, you have this ball in your hand, and so you have a message. Now, right now, this is your message. You're holding it. It's you. That's yours. For some reason, you need to get this message to Gary. If I'm going to send you a message, then I say, Gary, I have a message for you. Would you be willing to receive my message? If you say yes, then I send the message to you. Now, once that message leaves my hands, it is a potential message to Gary, but I have to watch to see if Gary caught it. If Gary didn't catch it, then I have to get the message back and I have to try again.
Do a better toss, to do a better relay.
Toss. If it still doesn't get through, then I have to change my approach. And once you have the message, it's your message. It's not my message anymore. My relationship with you, as far as that message goes, is accomplished. All of us have messages, and we lose sight of the fact that until that message has gotten to the other person and you have fully let go of it, you're responsible for the message. I would tell my students, who is responsible for the message? The sender. If the sender doesn't have a message or doesn't know what their message is, then that's the sender's problem. If the sender doesn't know how to throw a ball, that's the sender's problem. If the sender has been up for 3 days and hasn't eaten anything and is weak and shaky and, you know, that's the sender. The sender is in no condition to send a message. And so it is irresponsible, and this is hard when you are being beat down and then somebody says, okay, you're going to have to get yourself together. Your head blows up. I can't do anything else, you know. And so, but that is what has to happen. When you're in that situation, you have to get yourself to what I call center. If you think of the world as an arc, you know, right up here on the top of it is center. And you can kind of navigate about that much of it without slipping off, you know. But if you don't learn how to live at center and how to get back to center when you're confronted by some kind of horrible thing, then you won't be able to you're not going to be able to get that message where it needs to be. You know, and that message could be using your blinker in traffic. That message could be dealing with some person in line at the store, whatever. You need to be able to get your message. But we grew up with this thing that says if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And that's not responsible. That's not real. You know, if somebody I love is about to run out in traffic because they're playing with their phone, you know, it's not nice for me to grab the phone out of their hand and say, you are about to get hit by a car. That's not responsible. But especially in the serving world, nurses, teachers, subordinates, we think that we're supposed to be nice, and we are. But sometimes it's nice to change your approach. I had this conversation all of those times that I got called into the office. You know, I was like, I can see that we are not communicating well, and my part of that is my fault. Can you help me know how I can better communicate with you that you have set unrealistic expectations for this position and for these kids and for this district. And of course, I knew as I was walking down the hall, getting ready to go into that office and have yet another confrontation, that their heads were going to blow up when I said that to them. But that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to tell them what I think, to do it in a way that I'm going to be glad I did in 20 years from now, and to know that if I am in an intractable situation, we're just not going to get along well.
That's right.
You know, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to sacrifice my students. I'm certainly not going to sacrifice that 8-year-old between my ears. I'm not going to be ugly. I'm not going to become abusive. When I feel those, you know, oh my soul, I desperately wanted to throw some of those people over the building, you know. And when you have that much adrenaline going, you're perfectly capable of doing it. But would that get my message through? No. Not only would I be in the bear cage with this horrible situation going on, but now I've made more trouble rather than, at the very least, holding the trouble at bay. And we spend our whole lives learning how to play well on the playground and how to walk on the right side of the hall and all of those things that make things nice. But, you know, that arc we talked about, every one of us has a tendency to one side of that arc or the other. On this side of the arc, on this side of the arc is what you call peace faking. You fake it. You just make nice. You're just gonna be nice, and so you freeze or flee over here on this side. On this side, you break peace. You fight. You argue. You swear. You throw things. You live. You know. You become an aggressor with your aggressor. But we know that's not going to work. In order to teach a classroom full of kids, you have to know how to keep yourself one way, but you have to work on bringing out with those kids what you're doing. And so that means that you're going to use an entirely different set of mental skills to do something that you are passionate about, which is teaching. We're not teaching administrators. We're not providing health care for administrators. We're not doing what we love to do. We are fighting a war, a real war, with real blood and with real tears and real sweat. But as a habit, we're not war-like people. No. We don't want to be at war.
No.
We don't want to do that. And not only do we not want it, we are repelled by it.
Well, you don't want it visited upon you either.
No.
So not only are you not perpetrators, but we need to wind this up. I could listen to you all day. Your wisdom is infinite. You clearly have your calling, and your passion is never ending. I want to reinforce two things.
Okay.
Well, three things. Way back, you mentioned workers' comp as a failure. Because workers' comp was invented by and for employers, it is only there to dissuade you from filing a lawsuit. Actually, legally prevent you from filing a lawsuit.
Right.
So just understand that. It has nothing to do with workers' support or compensation, which is too hard to come by. One of the most damaged teachers, with a story akin to yours, spent 7 years in the workers' comp system, and then they gave her $159,000. I mean, they took her teaching career away, and it was chump change, as she always referred to it. Sure. Second point, it is so critical what you just said about being nice. The Oxford English Dictionary definition of nice shows that the word nice is derived from the Latin root necere, which is to not know, to be ignorant. To be nice is actually to be a fool. And though our mamas taught us, and so did yours and mine, you grow up to be nice, it seems to be a sucker's game. Why do we have to be nice when there are people, to use your arc as a model, who live and dwell at the aggressive end, who have been reinforced their entire lifetime for their aggression? And back to your neuroscience roots, there are so many who, because of neglectful or absent parenting in the critical period from birth to 18 months, if they are exposed to a coldness in the absence of reciprocated love, when all that baby wants to do is love and be loved, they grew up incapable of empathy, of love, of understanding people who work so hard as you to center themselves, because to them there's no range of behaviors. There's only one way to be, to dominate. So it's not a fair fight between thoughtful, caring, compassionate helpers, who are the teachers as targets, with these idiot people who just have no faith in human nature. And I want to end it with, as your example so well illustrates, no faith, period, of any kind. So they are godless, soulless, empathy-free, cruel perpetrators who just muddle through life thinking that they've got cat by the tail and life is good, and all they do is make others miserable. I will tap you for, well, I want to end the recording now.
Okay.
I'm scared to ask you for final thoughts because you have so many, but your wisdom will prove invaluable, and I'm sure people are going to tell me, we love Clara so much. I love you so much, and I thank you so much for saying this. Any final thoughts? Hard to summarize, but you've said so much. But looking back on all the years, and you did get detoured, you did find purpose. I want to see the end of your life. Any thoughts?
Really admire you and your wife for your work that you've been doing, because you have 9 years.
That's not what we're recording this for.
No, I know that. But in my final thoughts, the reason I say that is because we need resources. We need to find out how to sort ourselves out. So I think my final thought is that, I have number one rule: be safe at all times. And find the resources that you need. Take care of that 8-year-old or whatever, that inner part of yourself that's getting chewed up. Relearn, or maybe learn for the first time, what it is to truly love yourself. Truly grasp how truly, if you think of any child you've ever seen in your life, and that child is in you, and that child is beautiful and bright and articulate. And the very, very first thing every target needs to do is to come to terms with that part of themselves that is just absolutely worth fighting for. That's how I would make this.